Wow, I hate to be the moderator that's like, come on, we can do better than that, but we can do better than that, right? I was there last night. I was standing next to John Thompson. I know, I'm tired, but I'm here with scientists. Come on, are we here? All right, there we go. My name is Matt Wallert. I'm an applied behavioral scientist. I've been doing this a long time. Many of you know me and have seen me at previous conferences. I'm joined today on stage by a bunch of folks who are doing really powerful work in changing behavior in the finance space. And so I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, then we're going to do a panel as applied as we possibly can about how to actually do this kind of work at your company. So I'll turn it over to my good friend, Julie. Julie, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do, how you got into behavioral science.
How did I get into behavioral science? Hey, everyone. I'm Julie O'Brien, head of behavioral science at US Bank. I wasn't expecting to be asked that question, but since you asked, I'm a human, and I've always been curious about humans. Probably everybody here is also curious about humans. When I first took a class in social psychology, I realized there's an entire methodology that can help me study human behavior scientifically. That was really cool, so I went and did my PhD in social psychology, and then I realized that there was also technology that you could use to influence human behavior. So those two worlds coming together was really exciting for me, and I've spent my career trying to take what we know from the conceptual academic literature and apply it to product design, and that has led me to US Bank.
That's awesome. Summer, I know you're in the sort of product role. Like, how did behavioral science come in for you? Where did this start for you?
Yeah, thank you. Hey everyone, I'm Summer Shah. I'm head of product at Digit. And at Digit, we build products to help people get financially healthy, specifically intelligent and automated savings, banking, and investing products. For myself personally, it comes from a deep-rooted sense of guilt that I know a lot about money, but I always know I'm not doing enough myself, and I'm actually not managing my money that well. And so I always channel that guilt. And maybe it's also my immigrant parents always telling me I could do better. That's what I'm always challenging also when it comes to the product work I do.
Ironic science. I like it here. You're like, guilt is a very powerful promoting pressure, it turns out. Angela, what about you? How'd you come into this field? I know you started sort of in academia and then transitioned. Tell us about that.
I did. These were not in the planning notes, by the way.
I don't do the planning notes. They want extemporaneous.
I love it. So I'm Angela Hung. I am head of research at Earnin. So my background is, my PhD is in behavioral economics. I came to behavioral economics, I think somewhat similar to Summer, in the idea that I think a lot of behavioral economists, you know that you have these decision-making biases and anomalies, and you want to feel not so alone, and so you study these things. So I've worked for over 20 years in that topic of household finance, how people make financial decisions. I worked in the policy sphere for a long time in the academic area, and then recently I've switched to fintech because I think that fintech is what can really transform, or it has transformed, financial products and services in the US.
Got it. So there's that lovely, wonderful point that I heard echoed by both of you, sort of this moment of transition from studying human behavior to wanting to change it, right? So we all go into industry because there's this chance to do applied behavioral science, right? Not just to do translational research. Something worked in a lab, now we're going to go apply it in the world, which doesn't tend to work. And instead do what we think of as applied science. We're actually using the scientific methodology in situ to solve problems. So when I talk about applied behavioral science, usually I break it up into 4 phases. We talk about sort of understanding the behavior that we want, some sort of strategic step, some sort of insight step, understanding, well, what is the existing world that we live in? Why do people do what they do today? Then we have to build something, right? Product has to come in and say, okay, we're going to design something. Then we have to pilot test it. We have to see, does that actually work, et cetera. All of you have fantastic examples from your own work of how you've done applied behavioral science. And so what I want to start with is, before we get to those examples, let's talk about actually how you're set up. So starting with US Bank, how do we actually structure your behavioral science team internally? Like how does that process of figuring out what behavior you want to change, doing the research to understand why it happens, designing something and then bringing that out actually happen at your team?
So that's a really great question. I think one of the kind of fun and unique things about behavioral science is that there isn't necessarily a model to follow. So we're all sort of, leading the field and figuring it out as we go, which is great because it means we get to experiment ourselves and figure out what really works. But what we're doing right now is we've kind of divided our work up into 3 categories. So we have one category that's really focused on learning. And sort of the idea here is that there are certain things we know are good for people that come from the academic literature or policy research, but we don't necessarily know how to identify it and understand it in our populations. So this is part data science and it's part predictive surveys. It's also part experimentation, but it allows us to really zero in on the actual patterns that we want to try and solve for. So for spending, as an example, we know that we want people to kind of spend within their means, but we don't necessarily know what are the challenging patterns of spending that we should be trying to correct. And so that's partly a research question. We can look at the academic literature, we can look at our own data within our own company, and better understand what is problematic spending and how do we start to improve it. So that's kind of the first category, which is really around learning. The second category is then, okay, if we've kind of figured out what we need to be addressing, how do we then build an experience that actually addresses it? And this is again where we apply science. So it's sort of meta because we're applying science to understand like what's the actual problem we need to solve, and then we apply science again to figure out how do we build a solution to solve that problem. So from that perspective, we take a more systematic approach to product design where we again kind of really refine the problem that we want to solve, and then we make sure that our solution, whatever that is, whether it's kind of even simply copy or messaging or an entire digital experience, we want to make sure it addresses the barriers that are getting in the way. And so through that kind of more systematic approach, we get better problem-solution matching. That gives us more certainty that our solution is the right solution. Then we run experiments to make sure that it's actually right, and then we iterate from there. The third thing that we're doing is we're really invested in evolving the field of product design. So we actually have a behavioral product designer on the team who's amazing. We do a lot of work supporting the development of the entire design team. So we think of this as something, we're all humans and we all are curious about humans. And so if we can give everybody the right tools and the right data, then it becomes a shared discipline that the entire organization can adopt.
I love that last piece, right? As you know, I'm deeply invested in sort of evangelizing behavioral science and the idea that everybody in this room can be a behavioral scientist, right? You don't need a PhD. It's really about focusing on, behavior as an outcome and science as a process, and we all learned science in 8th grade, so we all can manage to do this. Hopefully we did.
You did.
You didn't learn science in 8th grade?
I know, it took me a while.
Oh, but you came to it eventually. That's what matters. And so I love that idea that you actually have a whole separate discipline where you're sort of saying, how do we propagate this sideways into the organization outside of the explicit team? Yep. I love that. Are other folks doing training internally? How do you, I know Angela, as you head up research, how do you propagate sort of the methodologies of science sideways into the organization?
Yeah, that's a good point. So we don't have a separate behavioral science or behavioral insights function or group at EarnIn because we're a small company. But instead, it's embedded in our research function. And I do think it's important for fintech research functions to have some kind of behavioral science perspective, even if they don't have a separate behavioral science group. For a number of reasons. One is that the stakes are so much higher when you're dealing with people's money and finances. This isn't typical user research. We're not just recommending the next show to stream. We're not trying to match sponsored content to your preferences, right? This is real stakes. And the other reason why I think behavioral science is so important, has to be sort of baked into the research function, is because financial decisions they're very complex. We know that financial literacy is low, and it's also emotional. And this is the exact environment where it's complex and it's emotionally charged. This is where standard economic decision-making theories really don't hold up. This is where behavioral science is so important. People have, they use the rules of thumb, they have biased judgment. This can all lead to suboptimal decision making. And so you need to support your users where you can. And so for us, even though we don't have a separate behavioral science group, it's sort of baked into our research and design team.
Awesome, I love that. That decentralized approach can be incredibly powerful. Summer, EarnIn has had a lot of success with sort of automated savings goals and other kinds of things, which I know came from some behavioral science principles. Do you want to walk us through sort of how that came to life and how that moved through the process at Product?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So similar to EarnIn at Digit, we don't have a dedicated behavioral function. What has worked for us really well is we have our product team, which for those of you who work at technology companies, what I describe now will not sound too different. We set a mission, we set goals, and then we go and run our product development cycle. But for us, we have always had this belief that Digit should only exist if it's going to have a differential role in how our customers interact with their money. And so for us, that's been built on a behavioral insight from the beginning. One where we said, we talked to many customers, we also talked to ourselves, channeling that guilt again, of why are we not financially healthy? Why are we not making the right money decisions? And we talked to our customers, 80% of our customers, they say financial health is important. They strongly agree. But that same customer base, when you ask them, 75% will say they don't have enough time and they don't want to think about money. So Digit, when we talk about our mission, we set our mission as making financial health effortless for everyone. And that has basically intentionally meant that in order to deliver on that mission, we have to think about behavioral economics and think about how our customers interact with their money. And so from that mission, it allows our teams to focus. We focus on essentially the Venn diagram of one, when we do any road mapping process, we think about what are the financial jobs that cause our customers the most acute stress and struggle, and two, which of those financial jobs are actually ripe for Digit software to automate or simplify things. So buying a house, maybe not as much, but deciding how much we should save out of your paycheck each day feels more closely in there, and that's why we've prioritized that job as well as other jobs like automated investing for the long term, budgeting your paycheck, things like that as well. And then because we don't have a behavioral function, what we do instead is we hold our teams accountable with product goals that are not just oriented around your traditional software goals like engagement or retention or activation, but also accompanied with actual financial impact goals. So we ask our teams, if they're building a savings feature or an investing feature, what's your theory for financial impact change? And how will you actually instrument quantitative metrics that come out of our app usage or our understanding of your bank account that will actually tell us on an ongoing basis as we make changes to our products, are our customers actually taking more financially healthy behavior? Is their actual outcomes, is their wallet actually changing in a positive way too?
I love that. One of the things I heard from both of you was sort of this prioritization function, right? How do we decide what are the right places to lean into changing behavior? How do you do that at Digit, and then how do you do that at US Bank? So how are you doing that prioritization function? Like, you gave a great example, right? Housing, maybe not so much,
Yep.
right? Sort of automated saving. How do you decide where to lean in from a behavioral perspective?
Yeah, totally. It takes a lot of talking to customers, and so we will do both a combination of quantitative surveys where we're trying to understand, kind of like market sizing, trying to understand from a large swaths of our customers what problems are the most acute for them. And we'll literally just ask them which of these problems are causing you the most anxiety right now and ask them to kind of stack rank it. That gives us a good sense of this is what's most top of mind for our customers right now. It's why, for example, when we decided where to go from savings next in our product roadmap, we decided, a lot of people would think investing is a logical place to go next because that helps you for the long term. But when we talked to our customers and we surveyed them, we found that over 2/3 of them were more anxious about their credit card debt and their student loan debt. So we actually moved into helping people use their savings to more directly pay off their debt. So that's one way in which we made a prioritization decision that was based on the hard data of what our customers were telling us was most anxious for them.
I love it. And how are you doing that you've got a whole function sort of deciding what to do. How's that happening for you?
Yeah, so I think in our case, it's a combination of things. One, we want to make sure that we're applying behavioral science ethically, so that's kind of baseline foundation. And then from there, we want to do things that are good for our customers and good for the business. And so because we are a relatively small team compared to the size of the organization, we try to find ideas that are really scalable. So things that are not directly tied to one product line or one specific financial behavior, but things that are kind of more generally applicable across the board. So one example of this is what we are starting to learn is that, and this is not a surprise to anyone, but people don't really care about bank products or financial transactions. They care about what it can do for them in real life. And so the idea of buying a home, you have to have a mortgage, and that's great, but a customer doesn't care about the mortgage, they care about the identity of being a homeowner. And so that's an example of where if there's sort of a psychological outcome that we know is really important that we want to help people achieve, then we can start to test and learn what's the right way to help people achieve that psychological outcome, or even something like a kind of a behavioral challenge of how do I avoid temptations today so that I can have something really important to me in the future. That's something that applies to investing, it applies to home ownership and all sorts of other financial behaviors. And so we really try to say, what's the psychological, human idea that we can really scale across the board, and then that feeds into our prioritization.
That's awesome. Can we drill down just a second on who are your stakeholders in the organization? Like, who are we talking to to help make that decision, right? How do we figure out what those breadth problems are across? I mean, is it the tech part of the organization? Is it the product part? Like, where's that coming from?
So we sit within the digital part of the organization, but we literally serve the entire organization. So we have some of our work focused on the human-to-human interaction. How can we really understand our customers when we're literally in a conversation with them, and how can we make sure that we're building a stronger relationship with them? And so that's one part of the organization. We also really care about helping our employees, and we're doing some work around ethical behavior, and so that's kind of supporting the internal organization. And then, of course, we spend a lot of time on the digital experience and how we can really leverage A/B testing and experimentation to build a really seamless and meaningful experience. And so we literally serve the entire organization, and we just make sure that we're kind of listening and having conversations with folks to make sure that we're focusing on things that are high impact.
Got it. Angela, I know you're in a smaller organization. How do you work with your stakeholders? How does research interface with helping people understand what the right place to lean is and where are those right problems?
Yeah, so our research team, the research and design team more broadly, sits on the product team. And so we are embedded in product, and we do, we do research anywhere from the very tactical directed research, once a product has been developed, to sort of test it and see how our users like it. But we also do research that influences the product roadmap at the beginning. So more foundational or strategic research that sheds light on who our users are, what their needs and wants are, what their struggles are, what their goals are.
I love that. What do you think, for your team, what's the sort of balance? Is that a 50-50 sort of ratio of like strategic to sort of tactical? Like, how do you mind which one you're doing?
Yeah, it's a good question, because the tactical is always the one that comes up at the last minute and sort of takes priority, and so we have to sort of rush and do that. But the foundational is what our team finds more important and more rewarding to actually be able to influence the product roadmap. And so it is sort of a balance. It's hard to say how we balance it, sort of percentage-wise, but the foundational work is longer and more ongoing, and then the tactical research sort of comes up. It's sort of what we consider rolling research that comes up as the product team has needs.
Summer, as a head of product, how do you deploy your sort of research capabilities? I think that's a great, Angela, I love the distinction you're drawing sort of between strategic and tactical research. How are you deciding sort of how to focus your research teams in on those questions?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we have a combination of actual dedicated researchers, designers that are research-minded, and PMs that are research-minded as well. And so usually that trio of PM, designer, and researcher are pretty aligned. What's worked really well for us is that we have an embedded approach. So we have different teams that are each focused on a different part of our customers' financial health. So we have a savings team that focuses on short-term savings and long-term investing. We have a banking team that's focused on our customers' needs for budgeting and spending. And then we have a borrowing team that's focused on how our customers interact with their borrowing and credit products. So each of those teams have a trio of those folks I mentioned. And so this is a bit of a cop-out. I don't need to centrally decide how folks are actually doing the work, but I do ask that the teams have a balance where similar to what Angela was saying, there is a combination of that foundational work and then that tactical work. And this is actually where it's difficult. At times, where this can go wrong is if a team gets too far ahead on foundational research that the product team is actually not ready to ingest, then it can kind of get stale and just sit on the shelf. And similarly, if the product team gets too far ahead and all of a sudden says, hey, I need like a bunch of research on this product experience that I just built, that's never the right way to go either. So it's a bit of an art in making sure everyone's aligned. And if you have that embedded approach, the three folks or multiple people in all three disciplines are all working together, they can have that balance. They know now is the right time to do this foundational piece of research because 6 weeks from now we're going to be doing annual planning, and that's the best time to have this piece of research. Or now is the right time to prepare because we're going to have 3 new features come out in the next 2 quarters. Let's figure out how we do a lot of real ride-along research to those feature development.
I love that idea of these sort of cross-disciplinary teams that, given higher level goals, then have autonomy, right? If you can hold them accountable, then there's autonomy to have a process underneath that. I love that. Julie, your team is relatively new, and as far as I know, the sort of largest and most senior team in a major bank that's sort of doing behavioral science. Congratulations, that's awesome. US Bank has stolen a march on all of you. How did that come about? Like, sort of, how did that discussion start? I know you were Weight Watchers previously. Like, how did they come to you? How did you start to help the organization understand the power and the right structure?
So I think I was very lucky because there were a lot of folks within the organization who already understood it. And it sort of came from two parts of the organization. So one part was really focused on sort of transformations and how do we build our bank into the future. And then another part of it came from the design world. And I think one of the big opportunities for behavioral science as a field is really in product design. And that's sort of a lot of growing recognition around how design thinking has gotten us really far, and it's really great for sort of sparking innovation and creativity, but it doesn't give us the systematic way of understanding what actually makes an impact for behavior change. And so really blending those two disciplines together in a way that actually fits within the structure of existing organizations is really growing in terms of companies trying to adopt this. And so I think in my case it was sort of a convergence of a handful of folks within the organization who wanted to do this work, and circumstance as having had experience in both kind of the academic side and then also lots of product experience, it was a really good fit.
I love that notion of behavioral science as sort of the anti-black box, right? Like, there's sort of epiphany-based design. We have this sort of brilliant designer who sits in a room and with a whiteboard and then just comes up with something, right? And then there's science, which is sort of the anti-black box. I understand why the core human need balanced against the existing environmental pressures leads to this behavior. I understand how I modify it. So if it doesn't work, I can sort of trace that chain back. I can say, hey, this didn't work, but I know why it didn't work. It's not just because I need to go have a new epiphany, right? There's sort of this chain of logic. Let's talk about building those teams that are able to do that. So Angela, I know you came out of the academic side. Do you favor PhDs versus non-PhDs? How do you build out your team? How do you hire? How do you, what interview questions do you even ask to sort of get these people with this right kind of mentality to be able to add into the right product process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't think for product research, I don't think a PhD is necessary. I think what we really look for is sort of a curiosity is one of the key things. And so one of the main questions we asked in an interview is just tell me about a piece of research that you recently did that you're excited about. We want to hear about how people think through, how people approach research, how they think about it, what excites them. You want someone who's excited about research and curiously, genuinely interested, right? Like we're all a little bit nerdy, which I think is perfect, right? Like you want to know, we have a lot of questions that you want to answer. And I think that is sort of most important. I don't think it's like a PhD per se really gives you that qualification. We have researchers who don't have a PhD who are very curious and very, and they're absolutely fantastic researchers. And you come across PhDs who just don't have that drive that we're looking for.
Yeah, I love that. When I was building the behavioral science team at Clover, it was a very eclectic mix because I tried to recruit from within the company. I wanted a diverse set of people. We had people from customer service that joined the team all over. And on literally our first meeting, that someone was like, so why us? Like, this is a very motley crew you've assembled. And I gave them the need for cognition scale, which if you've ever read it is a lovely scale which contains items like, do you want everything in your life to be a puzzle? That's the kind of person that does really well on these kinds of teams. They're like, oh, everything in life is a puzzle and I want to solve it and I have that sort of desire to do these things. I love that you put out an interview question. Summer, same question, like, what's your top, you talked about behavioral-minded PMs, behavioral-minded designers, behavioral-minded researchers. What's your sort of top, interview question that's helping you figure out who to bring into the organization?
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes to PMs, what I found that's most important is not any actual specific, academic skill sets. We're looking for creative problem solvers, and the combination of being a really, really strong creative problem solver who can break down a problem to its kind of strategic framework and then explain which pieces of the puzzle we should solve first is that combination with an empathy for the space we're in. And one of the advantages we have is we have a pretty narrow, focused, opinionated product mission. So we can really have people self-selected and say like, hey, you're here because you care deeply about folks who are financially underserved and you want to make them more financially healthy. That's what you care about. And so the thing that works best for us is we actually will have our PMs kind of dive into some problem that we have, some open-ended financial health problem that we have, and we'll ask them to just start doing some thinking on that. And what I want to see is their ability to break down a really open-ended problem into more manageable pieces, and to think about what are the right questions to ask the customer about each of those pieces so they can actually truly understand how the customer's life is today, what their pain points and anxieties are. And then because they're PMs also, I want them to start thinking about solutions, and I want to see how creative they can get. Can they think about simpler, easier, closer to home solutions? Can they think about crazier, out there in left field solutions? Because we want to be able to consider that full range.
I love that, and I love the thing you slipped in there about sort of being opinionated, right? Having an opinionated, pointy product makes it easier to hire, right? Because you can sort of, you can drill in with someone on something that's quite deep,
Yeah.
right? To be able to go after that. Julie, same question. Like, how are you building out the team? I know you've got a number of different kinds of roles on your team. How are you sort of figuring out who you need at any given time and going and finding those people in the market in a world where there's not an unlimited number of behavioral scientists at the moment?
Right. Yeah, so I do hire PhDs. I think that there is a lot of value that you can bring from a PhD program. I think it teaches you kind of systematic thinking. There's also a level of quant skills that are really nice to have. But we also have a design component of the team as well, and the behavioral scientists are not the only ones doing the work. So they're really, they have a very challenging job because they have to speak design, they have to speak data science, they have to speak kind of conceptual language, and they can't get stuck in the weeds. And so I really look for people that have a solid foundation in kind of the general conceptual basic social psychology, behavioral economics, but that they're able to like very quickly turn it into, here's how we would build out a digital experience that would bring this to life. And then the idea is that they're just one input into a larger team effort. So because they have a particular perspective, they can sort of help shape and guide the team towards something that's maybe more based in what we know from the literature and sort of help to create that kind of systematic approach to product design. But the idea is that it's the team collectively that is building something. And so we spend a lot of time doing workshops with teams and sort of getting them to participate in behavior mapping and designing the experiments that we're going to run so that it's not just, the scientist over here doing a bunch of work and then saying, go do this thing. It's really a shared effort. And that kind of creates that distributed model that, we've sort of talked about, where everybody then is sort of participating in the work of science. And there's just kind of one person in the group who can sort of lend a little bit more of that academic expertise.
I love that. And similar to the sort of anti-black box notion you were talking about earlier, right? There's an anti-bias notion here, right? What science helps us do is work against some of those automatic heuristics you were talking about, Angela, right? And so the wider group of people that we involve in that process, the greater we can counter those biases, right? Individuals have biases, groups are pretty good at sort of starting to counter them, especially if you get multiple perspectives. We have only a few minutes left, so I want to end off always on sort of forward-looking, future-looking. Biggest challenges, right? What's been hard, right? What is hard? What's going to continue to be hard? And how can the people in the room help sort of address that? Yeah, I'm looking at you.
Oh man, there's so many.
So many.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is that behavioral science is incredible and we've learned a lot and it's gotten us like incremental progress. And I obviously love behavioral science and I'm committed to it, but humans are really complicated and we don't have all the answers. So to kind of quote Adam Grant, I think intellectual humility is incredibly important. And so with that, like we just have a lot of progress to go. So we have introduced methods and we sort of understand now maybe how to operate and how to make progress more quickly, but that does not mean we know everything. And so I think, applying a scientific approach to learning more and understanding things and really questioning our assumptions will be very helpful in that hopefully quick progress that we can make at this point.
Yeah, there can be a challenge with leaders who are like, I read Nudge, there's a bunch of silver bullets, right? I just
and that's a big challenge, I think, for behavioral science as a field, because we want it to be democratized for everyone, but not every nudge is going to work for every problem. And so systematic matching is still really important.
Summer, same question. Where's the challenge, right, in applying this more broadly? What does the field need to do? What do the people in the room need to do?
Yeah. I think, I am very opinionated. I think that an automated future for finance is the way we're going to actually truly unlock things for customers. And we're seeing that across many different sectors, right? More and more software is taking more of the job out of your hands and automating it for you. In finance, it's particularly tough. Not to say that it's not tough in other fields also, but it's tough because, one, decisions that a machine is going to make for you have huge implications. If we make the wrong decision, it could be drastic impact on your life, on your family. Two, most people have really ingrained habits and their own kind of system that they use, which is complex. It's not just one piece of software they use. They use many different banking tools. They use many different at-home spreadsheets, things that they're using to manage and juggle. And so to actually go and say, I'm going to replace all of that with something else, with some operating system that's going to automate things for you, is a challenge compared to maybe doing that for like a workforce productivity tool or something like that. So the challenge to me is balancing how dramatically do you make changes for a customer in their life? Do you do small incremental changes? Like today, for example, if we're saving for a customer every day, we nudge them to say, can we save even more for you? Or can we help you set up another goal? That's what I would call incremental. Versus massive changes where with our banking product today, we actually tell customers, hey, you should direct deposit your entire paycheck in here. Forget about all the other tools you're using, and then we're gonna automatically budget it for you. So as your paycheck comes in, you may get paid $800 in this paycheck. You're only gonna see $200 that's available for you to spend. The rest is gonna go to your bills and your savings goals. That's a dramatic change. And what we found is that a portion of our customers, they're ready. They're like, give me this, I want this future right now. Then for a lot of other customers, they're like, whoa, you don't know about everything related to my finances. There's 5 or 6 other things I have hidden away that I need to think about. There's a bunch of heuristics I go through in my head. And so we have to constantly learn and understand and then actually build that into software that's scalable, which is a huge challenge. So finding that balance between incremental versus like dramatic changes. Sometimes we go too far in one direction. And we got to reel it back. That's the challenge.
I love it, love it. Angela, same question. Challenge for the field, challenge, in the field.
Yeah, I think, to sort of build on what Summer and Julie were saying, I think there are a number, part of the bigger challenge for behavioral science just in general, but especially with finances, is that you don't want to change people's behavior because you know better, because they actually know better. Like Summer was saying, they have other, they might have different situations, they have different goals, they have a different financial situation that you might not know about. And one of the challenges that we face is with financial decisions is that, they're always intertemporal decisions. And we know that people are dynamically inconsistent. So their short-term wants and needs are often at odds with their long-term goals. And so we all have to think about, are we here to satisfy their short-term wants and needs, for each aspect, or are we trying to satisfy their long-term goals? And it's hard as behavioral scientists, you don't want to impose one or the other because people can have very different preferences and situations. And I think that's sort of one of the ongoing challenges for behavioral science is to want to encourage better behavior, but not impose our own beliefs, our own preferences on somebody else.
I love it. All right, with our last 2.5 minutes here, we're going to do a lightning round of, you get to snap your fingers, and everybody is going to go back to their offices on Monday and do something differently. What would you like the people in the room to do differently in their organizations to support behavioral science, right? You can get them to do anything. What's the one action that they should take to start to further their organization moving into behavioral science? And I'll start at the end and then come this way. Angela.
One action. I don't have a good one. So one action, I think mainly it's building that sort of knowledge and that foundational base of a behavioral science perspective, of understanding that finances are very complex. It's not that people are foolish. It's not that they're being silly or irresponsible. It's that these are really complex decisions. And by understanding how they make these decisions, this is how we can help them make decisions that are best for them.
I love it. So your snap is, people aren't dumb, life is complex.
Yeah.
All right, I love it. Summer, what's your snap?
All right, I would say on Monday and going forward, when you're having your teams write goals, make them customer-oriented and think about them from the perspective of, not just are we gonna ship this product, are we gonna hit this business metric, what is the actual customer outcome that's gonna make the customer's life better? And you can still have your business KPIs and your other things you need to do, like we need to ship on this time or whatever, but have some customer-oriented factor in your goals, and then hold your teams accountable to that. Ask them how they're going to measure that on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, who's going to be doing what and why, and how are you measuring it? I love it. Julie, you snap your fingers. They go in on Monday. What are they going to do?
So I think I would advocate for just a basic systematic approach to product design. I think that enables you to then layer in behavioral science. So what that would mean is you make sure that you're solving the right problem and get really concrete about what it is. Then you make sure you understand that problem, and then you can match solutions. And if you can articulate why the solution is a good match, then you probably are better off than if you just came up with a good idea. And that allows you to collect data and then go back to your basic understanding of the problem in the first place. So that kind of problem-solution matching and systematic approach to product design, I think, gets you a long way, which then you can start to layer in some of the behavioral science concepts.
I love it. The death of epiphany-based design and the move to systematization. Thank you so much for coming today. Everybody give them a round of applause. We'll see you all after.